All right, welcome back, everyone. My name is Stephen Meade with Domicile Real Estate for people who love houses, and we are on a mission to help California's renters become homeowners. This is our Southern California first-time buyer market update. As far as I know, I'm the only agent out there really focusing on that entry-level end of the market when we do our market stats and tell you what's going on. And this week, I'm going to answer a question for you, and that is, if you're a first-time home buyer, probably asking this yourself, have I waited too long or have I missed out? And I think the answer to that is no. And I'm going to tell you why for a couple reasons. I'm going to start off saying, just my opinion, you're asking the wrong question. I think the right question is now is the right time for me to buy a house? I think that's a more important question to be asking. But let's go ahead and get started and go into the stats. This is our first slide, and this is closed prices. And I want to tell everybody a little bit about what this is saying. I don't think I've done a full explanation in a little while on this. If you're just tuning in with us, there are two things you need to know about this chart. Three things, actually. Thing number one, this is for Los Angeles and Orange counties. So this is not all of California. It's not even all of Southern California, but it is the two most populous counties in Southern California. Actually, I believe Orange County has more population than San Diego County, but that's item number one. Number two, if you're watching this, is the blue line is entry-level single-family homes. That's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath configuration. We use that as a model. And then the red line is an entry-level condo, and that is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath. So we sort of picked a housing archetype when we wanted to develop these stats to kind of represent a true entry-level end of the market. The third thing is what we call our first quartile tracking. So if you read a lot of real estate, you'll probably notice they say things like median home price a lot. Well, the median is exactly the middle, meaning 50% of the homes are more expensive than that, and 50% of the homes are less expensive than that. What we're doing instead with our first quartile is we're going halfway between the bottom and the median. So we're going 25% up the ladder, and that's really meant to give you a sign of what is it like at the entry level end of the market. And if we look at our closed prices here, I'm going to tell you something interesting. If you're looking at a single family home, your situation is actually a little bit better than it was last year. These prices have been largely very, very flat the last few months. However, if you are a condo buyer, and you'll remember I was telling condo buyers over the last several months, now is a great time to be a condo buyer. The market is soft. Well, guess what? The market has jumped a little bit on those condos. I think we're starting to see HOAs getting a handle on their insurance and their expenses, and that's starting to stabilize our market. So our next chart is about our total monthly payment. We always thought it's great to talk about prices, but does that really take into account interest rates and prevailing rates? And how are we doing with that payment over time on this mythical entry-level property that we're talking about? And we assume 5% down. We include the mortgage insurance, the taxes, and an HOA fee in the case of our condo. So how does that shape up? So again, if we take a look at this, we're a couple $100 higher than we were last year, about 5% higher. If you are looking at that condo, no surprise, that's reflected in the prices. However, if you are an entry-level single-family home buyer in that 3-bedroom, 2-bath sort of archetypical property, well, your payment is almost exactly the same as it was a year ago. So don't read into all the hype. Your situation is actually pretty much the same if you're a single family home buyer. Now, minimum household income required is we really wanted to put a face on what does this look like for households, right? So if you had no other debts, this is the minimum amount you would need to qualify for those payments. For our entry-level single family home, that's $159,000 and change of total pre-tax household income. And on our entry-level condo, it is $109,000 or just a little bit underneath there. If we look at our absorption rate, remember, this is a measurement of how fast are properties coming on the market versus how fast are they going off the market and finding buyers. We'll actually see that we are a little bit softer than we were last year on our entry-level single-family homes, and we are a little bit more competitive than we were last year on our entry-level condos. Now, Our condos are still a little bit of a less competitive market than single family homes, but that gap has narrowed between this year and this point last year. If you look at our total inventory, I think this one is a really interesting story. We still have a condo inventory level that is higher than it was at last year. However, condos are just moving a lot more quickly than they were last year. But if you look at that entry level single family home inventory, that inventory is actually a bit less than it was at last year. So don't always read into the hype. Always be careful, because when you're reading the newspaper or you're watching the news, you're often seeing either statewide or even national housing market statistics. Those statistics do not necessarily say what's going on in your local market. And the more specific of a thing you want, if you want to be in a particular neighborhood, the only market that really matters is what's going on in that neighborhood. If we look at our 14 days still active percentage, this is pretty much flat versus last year, though it is rising. That indicates a little bit of a lessening of competition. And why is this different than our whole market update that we gave a week ago? Well, this just proves again that the entry level end of the market moves differently than the rest of the market. That is the reason why we started doing these stats in the first place. The entry level end of the market is far more sensitive to interest rates. I do think we're going to see this in the next month come back down again, indicating a more competitive market because those rates have started to ease a little bit. Finally, we've got our week's supply of homes, right? And while this is another way of measuring how much inventory do we really have as measured in weeks of homes, if you look at this on our condo basis, we're at about 20 weeks of inventory. We've been at that point before, but you'll notice that's really not that big of an increase from last week. And that curve is flattening out quite a bit. I think that curve is going to start dropping. On our entry level single family home, we are kind of at a bit of a high point. Where maybe half a month more than we were at last year. But again, these numbers are so similar to last year at this point in time to not really make that much of a difference. So, in a lot of ways, what's the conclusion you could draw? It's not too late for you if you feel like you've missed out on this. And in fact, I would still much rather buy in a higher interest rate market. And the reason why I like higher interest rate markets is because you tend to have a much more leverage with sellers. I'll admit, we're in a fairly balanced market. This isn't a complete buyer's market, but it's a lot better than low interest rates. Let me promise you. The other thing is, when those rates come down, and rates don't stay high forever, and even whether they come down or not, any drop in rates is a welcome surprise. The payment you are making today on a home that you buy with a 30-year fixed mortgage will likely be the highest payment, at least for that principal and interest, that you will be paying while you own that home. It's one of those deals where you have an opportunity to save money or nothing, but there's not really a chance that your payment is going to go up, which is probably one of the best things about having a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. It's one of those things that really only exists in the United States. Take advantage of it while you can. Anyhow, that's all I've got for you this week. Thanks so much for watching. Questions, comments, as always, we love them. Hit the like button. It really helps us out. We've got some more home tours coming to you. So if you're a person who loves home tours, we've got an awesome architectural property under $1 million. We are about to put that up in the next couple of days here, and we're working on a couple of other amazing home tours for you. If you or someone you know should become a homeowner here in Southern California, we would love to talk to them. Definitely reach out. We will see you again real soon.